a WYFF News 4 special.
We weren't prepared to lose all of this.
I hate seeing my people go through something like this.
Coming off of an active hurricane season in 2023.
An angry ocean as the eye of Idalia approaches Charleston at high tide.
Then you've got Hurricane Tammy, Category 1 storm. It's going to track up to the northeast.
But Idalia, the only hurricane to make landfall in the U.S.
I'd certainly be nervous if I were responsible for owning or insuring any of these front row houses.
We break down why this year is expected to be active once more.
We also have tornado watches in effect for every single area along our beaches.
Our weather team is tracking it all.
These are very strong storms that are continuing to push primarily to the east and southeast.
To keep you informed and safe. Tonight, WYFF News 4, forecasting our future. Hurricane Outlook.
Good evening. I'm WYFF News 4 Chief Meteorologist Chris Justice. Thank you for joining us. Hurricane season starts on June 1st. Tonight, the WYFF 4 weather team will join me in getting you ready for any severe weather that may come our way in the next 6 months. And tonight, as part of our ongoing commitment to forecasting our future, I'm going to dig deeper and not only give you the forecast, but also some perspective, like how this hurricane season stacks up against normal years. My goal with any severe weather is to give you all the information you need to keep your family safe. In recent years, we've been no stranger to active hurricane seasons. Just last year, Idalia stands out as the worst and the only hurricane to make landfall in the United States. And it was a monster. Category 4 at landfall. Winds reached 134 miles per hour with a storm surge of 7 feet. Idalia is the third strongest hurricane to ever make landfall in Florida. Now, 2022 was known as a relatively slow year, with the exception of one major storm, a devastating Hurricane Ian, reaching Category 5 strength at times, threatening Tampa before hooking right and hitting the Fort Myers area, with winds near 150 miles per hour and a 13-foot storm surge. The storm weakened as it moved north, eventually getting back out into the Atlantic, where it made a second landfall here in South Carolina. The storm brought significant beach erosion to the Carolina coast and flooding rains. And though wind often gets the headline when it comes to hurricane season, it's flooding that brings the most damage and the loss of life. 2021 is an example of that, where even tropical storms can't be taken lightly. The remnants of Tropical Storm Fred brought deadly flooding to the western North Carolina area as over 20 inches of rain fell in one night. The storm also brought a record number of tornado warnings to the upstate. Now, I want to show you some perspective here. Hurricanes work on cycles, and when you look at the data here dating back many, many years, we can kind of time out how often hurricanes make a return to a coastline. And when it comes to a Cat 1 or a Cat 2, you got Ian and Matthew, the last ones to strike South Carolina, and on average, those return every 8 to 9 years from Charleston to Myrtle Beach. A little bit more often in North Carolina, every 5 to 7 years. When it comes to major hurricanes, those are a lot less frequent, okay? So Category 3 to Category 5, you've got Hugo that stands out in 1989. That was 35 years ago. Now, on average, if you look back at data, major hurricanes return to the Myrtle Beach, Horry County area every 23 years, to Charleston every 34 years. So we're getting to that point where we can kind of look at the data and say, you know, with time, it's not a matter of if, but when one will return. Now, new technology is helping us gather that information about hurricanes and as they form and oftentimes race toward land. This early information and data can help save lives. Meteorologist Griffin Hardy went to Charleston to check out the Hurricane Hunter planes that fly right into the center of the storms.
So we're here at Charleston International Airport, where the National Hurricane Center is doing their hurricane awareness tour. They're taking the Hurricane Hunter aircraft behind me going down the East Coast, and they stopped here in Charleston for the day, and they're giving tours of the WP-3D. That's what they fly into the hurricanes on the left, as well as the C-130 on the right. They really need these to get real-time data anytime those big storms start coming in.
The data that we gather on the airplane goes right into the weather models and then also right to the desk of the Hurricane Center forecasters so they can best make their forecasts.
Jeremy DeHart is a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force and is the weather officer on board the C-130 during Hurricane Hunter missions. He explained how drop sons work. Those are the physical instruments dropped out of the bottom of the plane along its flight path to take real-time weather measurements inside the hurricane.
It gets loaded into this chute. See, it fits right down in the sleeve. This whole chute comes down, hits a button, and shoots out the bottom of the airplane. And then this parachute will deploy, and it trickles all the way down to the sea surface.
And it isn't just the Air Force responsible for flying these missions. NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, has their own plane for flying Hurricane Hunter missions into the biggest storms, too.
When we collect our data, we get it off the aircraft in almost real time. We do a real quick QC check, and then we get it off to our partners at the National Hurricane Center so that they can get it out to the public and the emergency managers as soon as possible.
And the director of the National Hurricane Center says even though trends still point towards 2024 being a more active year than usual, no matter what, all it takes is one big storm.
We have very warm ocean waters in the Atlantic, another factor that would tend, if all things being equal, to be to favor a busy season. So, but regardless of what any seasonal forecast says, people have to prepare every season, and that's the real message.
We would just, want to say, please heed those warnings and evacuation orders if necessary, because that's ultimately what we do.
Reporting in Charleston, meteorologist Griffin Hardy, WYFF News 4.
That's fascinating. Now, from planes to drones, a new era of hurricane forecasting has set sail, and it's making waves in forecasting tropical systems as we know it. Perella Lewis shows us what could be the future of hurricane forecasting.
So this one went right through the middle of the eye of Hurricane Idalia when it was in the Gulf of Mexico, intensifying.
Greg Foltz is the co-lead of NOAA's Cell Drone Hurricane Observations Project, using these unmanned cell drones equipped with sensors and video cameras to go into hurricanes, sending back information like we've never had before.
Air temperature, humidity, temperature and salinity of the ocean, the currents in the ocean in the upper 300 feet or so, and video is pretty exciting. Videos and pictures.
These solar-powered drones first set sail back in 2021, getting into the Guinness Book of World Records in its very first year.
We had a wind measurement of 145 miles per hour in Hurricane Sam. So that was set a record for the highest wind measured by an uncrewed surface vehicle ever.
But how exactly does it work?
So they go out there and we give them waypoints, latitude, longitude, wherever we want them to go through satellite communications. And then they can adjust the sail and adjust the rudder, and pretty much automatically they can get to where they need to go.
Intercepting storms and sending back data in real time.
So we're getting sometimes 20 measurements per second, really high resolution, continuous throughout the whole hurricane.
Like the sensors dropped from hurricane hunters that fly into these storms and send back weather information, this is a first of its kind monitoring from the ocean, gathering information from all aspects of the storm continuously, which is critical for the here and now, but also for the future of forecasting.
We're finding out new things about how the ocean surface can slow down a hurricane's winds,
which could help lead to better hurricane intensity predictions. But just how can these unmanned cell drones survive going into strong hurricanes time after time?
They're really well designed. They look pretty flimsy if you look at them from the surface. They're just this board floating with the sail sticking up. But underneath, they have a keel that goes down about 10 feet.
Each one of these weighs about 1,000 pounds, with most of the weight being underneath the ocean. These cell drones also give information about dangerous wave heights sooner, helping forecasters get information to people living on the coast even faster.
If you have a major hurricane out in the North Atlantic, even if it's away from land, that can generate huge swells that propagate and can create dangerous conditions on the coast, especially the U.S. East Coast.
Giving us more information than we've ever had on tropical storms. Perella Lewis, WYFF News 4.
Still to come on our Forecasting Our Future Hurricane Outlook, a few items you'll want to keep on hand this summer. Welcome back. When it comes to hurricane season, it's important to be prepared for whatever comes our way. Meteorologist Sydney Sullivan has items you should have to be ready.
Now is a time to be proactive. Have emergency supplies and a plan laid out before the storm hits. You should also build an emergency kit with things like non-perishable food, bottled water, a flashlight, chargers, and any medical needs like a first aid kit or prescriptions. Experts also recommend getting a weather radio and checking on your insurance coverage. For more information about how to get ready and stay safe, head to WYFF4.com. There you can access links to the Red Cross and South Carolina's Department of Emergency Management, both dedicated to keeping you safe. And if your travels take you to the coast, know whether or not you are in a flood-prone area and the possible evacuation routes that might be needed. And know the types of alerts that are possible, like a hurricane watch or warning, and the risks they present. Chris, back to you.
Thank you, Sydney. Often you'll hear people say, I can feel it in my bones when the weather is changing. Perella Lewis joins us to explain just why that is.
Hey, I get asked this question a lot. Before bad weather comes, my joints start hurting. I can feel it in my elbow or in my knees. Could it actually be weather related? And the short answer is yes, because of something called barometric pressure. This actually measures the weight of the air around us, or the atmosphere. By the way, that weight is a little over 14 pounds per square inch, in case you were wondering. We've got tropical systems and storms. Those are all part of that basically system that comes in and causes our pressure to decrease. So if you've been watching the weather for any length of time, you've heard us talk about high pressure and low pressure. High pressure is sinking air. This is typically associated with good weather. Low pressure is bad weather. Those are hurricanes, tropical system storms, and that is rising air. So when we're talking about low pressure systems, we're talking about rising air. And that air is actually, as it's rising, it's pressing against our bodies a little less. And it's that lack of compression that can cause our tissues and our joints to swell, even fluids in our joints to move around a little bit more. So that decrease in pressure is what can cause swelling, and that's what leads to those aches and pains right before bad weather comes.
Still to come, new research to guard our homes against hail damage. Plus, how oyster shells are being used to help preserve our beaches. Welcome back to our Forecasting Our Future Hurricane Outlook. You likely remember the names of some of the biggest hurricanes to hit our region. Meteorologist Dale Gilbert joins us with a little history behind those names and a look at this year's list.
Hi there. Ever wondered why hurricanes have names? Well, we know each year as the oceans warm with the summer heat, that increased evaporation from the moist ocean air fuels the storms that develop. The National Hurricane Center has produced 6 lists of names years in advance so we can track these storms throughout the season. And that season runs from June 1st to November 30th. They can and have come earlier than those dates, but typically most develop during that seasonal range. Names are easier to track and remember than longitude and latitude stats. The list will alternate each year between male and female names and contain 21 names to start. Now, should any of those names reach major storm status with catastrophic loss or death, then that name is retired from use. It's now part of weather news history. For example, Hugo, Katrina, Andrew, and many others have been retired from use. You ever wonder why Carol or Connie, Matthew or Michael aren't used? They already have been, and were deadly storms that became part of weather history. Names begin when the tropical cyclones develop winds sustained at 39 miles per hour. Some continue to grow to hurricanes, some don't. How active hurricane seasons become can vary with many factors involved worldwide. This year's list of names begins with Alberto and ends with the name of William.
Thank you, Dale. Earlier this spring in the Midlands, research meteorologists discussed how they can best guard homes against hail damage. That can sometimes accompany hurricanes and tornadoes. Meteorologist Griffin Hardy traveled to Richburg to learn more.
We're here at the Insurance Institute of Business and Home Safety down in Richburg, learning about hail impacts. They've got a full freezer full of hailstones up to 2 inches here and a hail cannon that they shoot at shingles to figure out exactly how much damage they can do. 3, 2, 1.
Dr. Ian Giamanco is the lead research meteorologist here at IBHS and met with fellow hail researchers from the Northern Hail Project based in Alberta, Canada. Their main goal is to find new ways to construct homes and businesses that help mitigate costs from damages brought by severe hailstorms.
And so it's very important as you start to get tired of dealing with replacing your roof from hail damage to look for better performing building products that can actually remove some of that frustration of having to replace your roof every 3 or 4 years.
And in the lab, there's a huge amount of equipment they use to replicate realistic hailstones. Even getting the chemical composition of each hailstone along with the size is considered during testing.
To create our laboratory hailstones, we actually use dissolved carbon dioxide to help introduce gas and really tiny, tiny bubbles that mimic some of the same structure and strength that you see in natural hailstones. We want hailstone number 7 to be the same as hailstone number 205. So we've got to match those ice properties to be able to shoot them at the different materials so they get a fair shake in how we understand the modes of damage. Now again, which ones perform well, which products don't perform well.
The practical application for what's being done here is what Dr. Giamanco says is one of the most rewarding parts of the research they get to do here at IBHS.
A lot of times when we do research, we're doing it to get a better scientific understanding. But in this case, we're not only learning and advancing the science, we have a practical application for all of us who have roofs, who have walls that can get damaged from hail. So that's one of the most rewarding things about this work.
Reporting in Richburg, meteorologist Griffin Hardy, WYFF News 4.
Incredible visuals there. Thanks, Griffin. Meteorologist Sydney Sullivan joins us now to tell us about a partnership that's returning oyster shells back to their original homes. And it's all to help save our beaches.
When you think of oysters, you might think of an oyster roast or a low country boil. But what you may not realize is just one oyster can play a big role in preserving our coast. Something so small adds so many benefits to the ecosystem, even a couple hours away from the coast.
Oysters are filter feeders, so they're filtering at least 2.5 gallons of water every hour, and that's just one single oyster. They provide home to over 120 different species.
They can also become a natural barrier.
And when that reef becomes an established reef, those beautiful clustered formations that they form do a really, really good job of dissipating like boat wake energy, and does it to a degree that that marsh will start to grow back up behind that reef, and you have what is considered a living shoreline.
Even once you shuck them, you don't have to chuck them.
So Greenville actually recycles 5% of all, over 5% of all shell that's recycled in the state of South Carolina.
And that is actually more than some of our coastal areas.
This shell serves a higher purpose. That shell itself is a natural resource and should be going back onto the shoreline.
SC, DNR, and REWA have partnered together in an effort to bag up oysters that can now be recycled and taken to the coast.
Being able to take this renewable resource that's collected up here that would otherwise go to the landfill and bring it back down to the coast to be able to complete that life cycle.
Earlier in May, these upstate oysters made the return back to sea and called Edisto their home.
To deploy the very shell that they recycled onto the shoreline for a dedicated REWA reef, and they're going to be coming back year after year building on this same reef.
We love every bit of it.
Even local restaurants are making sure no shell is left behind.
Every single oyster that we shuck, every oyster that we grill gets stored separately, no trash included. We try to keep it all very clean, and then we load them up in the back of a pickup truck and we drive down here and do our duty.
And it's so neat to see local businesses and communities coming together to help our coast one oyster at a time. In Greenville, WYFF News 4, I'm meteorologist Sydney Sullivan.
The El Nino factor, or lack thereof, this year. Coming up, I'll show you all the many roles that play into my hurricane forecast. Welcome back. Now to the important part of the key of the matter here is what we expect this hurricane season. We've been poring over the data, and one of the most glaring things that are standing out to us right now is just how above normal the sea surface temperatures are. When you kind of look at the ocean content right here, the main development region, we're talking temperatures that are typical for August. So this is fuel for storms, and not only does that allow for possibly some early development, but also allows for stronger development, especially in these areas that are already cooking right now temperature-wise. Now, let me show you when we typically will see activity start to brew. Now, June and July technically is hurricane season, but it accounts for about 5 and 7% of named systems. You go toward August and September, that's the bulk of hurricane season when you typically get your most named systems. If you want some easier math, like I usually like, seeing it laid out another way, you take a typical year. August and September normally account for about 9 storms, where June and July are about 1 or so. But with us having an unusually warm sea surface temperature right now, it would not surprise me to get some earlier development in those normally calmer months. Now, the Nino factor is a big important thing that we look at when it comes to winter storm forecasting or hurricane season forecasting. And simply put, when you have a strong El Nino, the jet stream is active here. That can tend to shred apart or at least disturb hurricanes, especially when they're in their infancy way out here in the Atlantic. This year, unfortunately, we do not have the Nino factor. It is, in fact, a La Nina year that's developing. Our last El Nino was 2014-2023. La Nina was a setup that we had kind of in place 2017 through 2022. Almost each of those years had record-breaking seasons. So La Nina is just another ingredient, so to speak, for what could be an active year. So our hurricane forecast outlook looks like this. As far as average is 14, that'd be a normal year. We're forecasting 21 named storms. Hurricanes, possibly out of those named storms, 10 of them could be named and 7 would be normal. Out of them, major hurricanes. Now, the ingredient that plays into this is just how unusually warm the sea surface temperature is. It's basically fuel. It's like having gasoline right there by a fire. You add that together and boy, some of these storms could really become strong that would normally be a little bit lower there. So that's just one of the main factors that we have. When you break it down data-wise, now the College of Colorado State University did some extensive research. Now a normal year would bring in a certain amount of risk to the Carolina coast. Now the chance of at least one named storm making landfall in South Carolina is up almost 19% compared to a normal year, plus 17% in North Carolina. How about a hurricane? At least one hurricane making landfall, they're going with a 44% chance of that happening this season in South Carolina. That's up 15% from normal. That's kind of the key factor that I look at there. When you look at the chance of at least one major hurricane, that's up 6% compared to normal. So yes, the risk is there, at least a higher risk this year of a hurricane striking land, but also it being a strong hurricane. Saharan dust is a big wild card that we need to look out for in this case. If you get a lot of Saharan dust at any given time, even if it's active, it's like putting a blanket on a fire. Sometimes it can really squash things before they even get going, and we'll be watching that. Usually when it comes to tracking Saharan dust, you get a lead time of about 2 to 3 weeks, so we can see if that's coming in and let you know when that happens. Now, a reminder that our weather team is always tracking our forecast on the WYFF News 4 mobile app. You can download it for free. My family has it. You can keep tabs on hurricane tracks and other severe weather 24/7. Now, thank you for joining us tonight for our Forecasting Our Future Hurricane Outlook. Know that our weather team will keep you up to date all hurricane season long as storms develop and move through our area. Have a great night.